reject the Catholic Church's teaching on euthanasia in a recent interview, saying he does not believe the practice, in contrast to the Church's teaching, to be, quote, evil as such, close quote. In a September the 28th interview given to the Belgian newspaper Le Libre, Bonny said the Church's teaching that euthanasia is an intrinsic evil is, quote, too simple an answer that leaves no room for discernment, close quote. Yikes. The Times of Israel are reporting Egypt intelligence official says Israel ignored repeated warnings of something big. Mounting questions over Israel's massive intelligence failure to anticipate and prepare for the surprise Hamas assault were compounded Monday when an Egyptian intelligence official said that Jerusalem had ignored repeated warnings that the Gaza-based terror group was planning, quote, something big, close quote, which included an apparent direct notice from Cairo's intelligence minister to the prime minister. He said Israeli officials were focused on the West Bank and played down the threat from Gaza. Quote, we have warned them an explosion of the situation is coming and very soon, and it would be big, but they underestimated such warnings, close quote. And those are your headline news. Let's continue to pray for the repose of the souls that are lost there. The gospel today comes to us from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me. The Lord said to her in reply, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I think our YouTube stream went down. I think producer Jake's working on getting that back up. But the Rumble, the Facebook, and our website at thestationofthecross.com/ACT are also currently great places to hang out and chat if you like, as well as the Telegram group in addition. Hey, Father McKeevely writes, unquestionably, Martha was duly sensible of the exalted honor conferred on her in being privileged to be the hostess of the Son of God. St. Augustine would say, but still a servant received her Lord, the sick her Savior, the creature her Creator. But if any should say, oh, blessed are they who have been thought worthy to receive Christ into their houses, grieve not thou, for he says, for inasmuch as ye have done it to the least of my brethren, ye have done it unto me. But taking the form of a servant, he wished therein to be fed by servants, by reason of his condescension, not his condition, close quote, St. Augustine. Father McKeevely goes on to say, although Mary and Lazarus lived in the same house with Martha, the latter only is said to have entertained him and his followers, probably because, being the elder sister, to whom the house and possessions there belonged as her portion, she exclusively managed the household concerns, whereas Mary had been away in Galilee, whence she followed our Lord. Hence, her great anxiety on this occasion to prepare everything in a manner worthy of so distinguished a guest. Martha, Martha, the repetition of the name indicates affection, or perhaps was meant to invite attention. The one thing declared to be necessary is seeking and securing the salvation of our souls, the essential end of our creation and of our coming into this world. Secure this, all is well. Lose or forfeit this, everything else is lost. This alone is necessary. Everything else is useless, save as far as it conduces to secure this end, this priceless good. Everything else, everything other than gain, every other gain or acquisition is lost, nay, noxious, if it in any way mar this essential end. What in the world is Father McKeevely saying here back in the 19th century? He's saying you are like that servant who found a treasure hidden in a field, and you went and you sold everything you had to buy that field because you knew that this was everything. Salvation, getting to heaven, is all that matters. Nothing else matters as much as getting to heaven, or your spouse, or your children to heaven, let alone your siblings, your neighbors, your coworkers, that stranger that you might bump into. You might be the instrument in which the Holy Spirit uses you to try to reach those people. And I can tell you that is our one and only mission. And that is what Father McKeevely is trying to point out. We must focus on what comes first, the salvation of our soul and those of those around us. Saint Cyril of Alexandria says this: by his own example, then, he teaches his disciples how they ought to behave in the houses of those who receive them. Namely, when they come to a house, they should not remain idle, but rather fill the minds of those who receive them with sacred and divine teaching. Woo! Are you doing that? Am I? He goes on to say, but let those who make ready the house go to meet their guests gladly and earnestly for two reasons. First, indeed, they will be edified by the teaching of those whom they receive. Next, also, they will receive the reward of charity. Close quote, St. Cyril of Alexandria. Pray for us. Do you remember when they made a Hollywood film and they made St. Cyril of Alexandria out to be the bad guy because he tried to convert pagans? Remember that? Whew, man, oh man. It's too bad good money was wasted on such a film. St. Cyril of Alexandria, pray for us. Hey, we're coming back with Chris Tomlinson, the European conservative. We're going to be talking about the invasion in Europe, how all that is affected.
Atheists claim theists are essentially no different than atheists because we reject gods too, such as Greek and Roman gods. But this is plain absurdity. What's our reason? First, it's an abuse of language. A theist believes in at least one God. An atheist doesn't believe in any God. They're mutually exclusive terms. To say a theist is an atheist to most gods is like saying a married man is a bachelor to most women. Second, it's bad reasoning. To say I'm an atheist because I reject some gods is like saying I'm an anarchist, one who rejects all forms of government because I reject communism and fascism, some forms of government. But that's silly. So the claim that atheists and theists are no different doesn't hold water. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Hear what listeners are saying about the free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
Listen live or at your convenience to your favorite shows. Just search for iCatholic Radio in your app store today.
Father Willie Doyle, an Irish Jesuit priest, known for his joy even in the face of war. His courage made him legendary. His compassion made him beloved. Father Willie gave his life on the battlefield of World War I, insisting that he be with his men. Now his cause for canonization has been opened. To find out more about this man of heroic virtue, visit the Willie Doyle Association at www.williedoyle.org.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's good to be on with you. At 30 past the hour, Edward Pentin is going to be joining us. We tried to have him on yesterday. It didn't work out, but he's back today. We're going to be talking about his book, The Rigging of a Vatican Synod, published by Ignatius Press. I've been reading this book. It's very, very intriguing. And golly gee whiz, there's tons of parallels for the synod that's going on right now in Rome. We're going to get Edward Pentin to give us his take on all of that at 30 past the hour. Do join us if you can. But there are lots of stories in the news that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. And Chris Tomlinson is somebody I often will look at for insight in what's going on, especially in Europe, over at the European Conservative. We're going to be linking to his articles today at the show notes, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Chris Tomlinson, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning or good afternoon here in Brussels.
Well, we're glad for your time today. You just got back from Italy. You went to what they call ground zero for the immigration crisis happening in Europe today. What did you see when you were there?
Well, I saw a lot of things. It was a very interesting experience. It's definitely ground zero, as you said, for the migrant crisis. It is the gateway to Europe. There's even a monument there that is called the Gateway to Europe that sort of describes and encapsulates the role of the island in the illegal migration crisis. What I saw was very interesting. I saw two parallel worlds living side by side. One was the tourism and the local people who live on Lampedusa, who engage in their day-to-day lives, seemingly not unaware, but in a state separated from the ongoing migrant crisis. But the migrant crisis was there if you knew where to look. Where we were staying, actually, by our hotel, was the port where all of the migrants are brought to, which is a military zone where the Coast Guard, the Guardia di Finanza, and the Carabinieri bring the migrants. And we saw just boats upon boats upon boats of dozens of migrants at a time being brought to this dock, where they were given rudimentary first aid by the Red Cross, put in vans, taken to the reception center, where they didn't have any interaction whatsoever with any of the locals or any of the tourists. And so they were basically kept isolated away from everybody else. And so that led me to state that there is basically a parallel sort of society going on between the tourism on the island, the locals, and the migrant crisis that is going on.
And so boat after boat, were these all males, as is often reported? Were there women and were there children?
Of the several landings that I observed, the vast majority, if not all, of the people were men. I would say most of them probably 15 to 40, around there. It was quite hard to see some of them, but from what I could tell, it was mostly men. I did see some reports of a couple of women that had come, but I did not observe those people in the landings that I saw.
Now, are these immigrants coming from mostly, I'm taking it the North African coast? They're paying for that passage. They're paying like a trafficker or a coyote of some sort to get into their boat and be ferried across the Mediterranean?
Yeah, they're paying usually a couple of $1,000s each in order to be put on these tiny boats. I mean, these boats are not big. They're definitely not seaworthy as far as crossing the Mediterranean. And they're often overpacked as well because the people smugglers want to squeeze as much money out of each crossing as they can possibly get. And so you get these people put in a dangerous situation where the slightest bit of inclement weather can mean that, dozens of people can drown in the middle of the ocean. And so far, according to, I believe it was the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, at least 2,500 people have died trying to cross the Mediterranean to Lampedusa, Sicily, and elsewhere.
Wow. Yeah, you talked about that in your articles. Again, we're going to be linking to Chris's articles in the show notes, but it's EuropeanConservative.com. You can also find Chris on X or Twitter, Chris Tomlinson. We'll link to that as well. And these are important stories because they're so complex. And one of the complexities of this story, Chris, that I want to get your take on is it seems to me that these are mostly military-age males, as you stated a minute ago, mostly Muslims. Were you able to interact at all with any of these migrants and sort of talk to them personally to see what their story was, why they came, what they hoped to accomplish?
That was one of the things that we tried to do while we were there on the island. But the way that it's set up, it makes it very difficult. So there's no way to interact with any of the people who come on the boats once they land. They're essentially given a bottle of water, checked for any emergency medical needs, and then put on a shuttle directly to the hotspot reception center. So we tried to go to the hotspot reception center. We weren't allowed in. We were told by the military and by the police there that no one was allowed in except was express permission from the Italian Interior Ministry. And we sought that permission, but we were unable to get it. We talked to the Red Cross, and they were unable to allow us to go into the reception center. We also hung around the city in Lampedusa to see if there are any of the migrants who may come out to the city, perhaps to eat, or I was personally told that occasionally on the weekends they will go out where there are live music and dance and have a good time. But unfortunately, when I went there, none of them were out. So unfortunately, I did not have an opportunity to talk to any of them personally.
There's lots of reports coming out that the immigrants are, not all, of course, but at least a portion of them have caused quite a bit of stir and trouble in the communities that they're now finding themselves in, whether it's France, Germany, or Italy. Especially if you're down in Naples, it would seem like there's tons of reports of big issues there, and it seems like also the Italians are really getting kind of fed up with a lot of it, and they seem to be fighting back. I see lots of video of them getting into fights with these immigrants on the streets, and things don't seem to go very well. One of my big concerns, though, is now with the Israeli-Hamas conflict that we're seeing demonstrations all over the world. In fact, there was some video coming out of Sydney, Australia, of all places, where it kind of looks like it's getting violent. So is there the potential with such a large Muslim population now living in Europe to see a massive amount of demonstration that could actually get pretty violent there, given the already track record that we're seeing?
Yeah, I definitely think the potential is there, especially in places like Germany and France. In France, I was reading a report this morning in which the French media was saying that within the 48-hour period in which the war started, there were at least 20 anti-Semitic incidents. So wow. I think there is a huge potential to see, shops being smashed up, Jewish shops, kosher shops, these types of things that are visible targets of the Jewish community in parts of Europe. Thankfully, in some parts of Europe, for example, Austria and Germany, there is already a large police presence in historic Jewish neighborhoods anyway that might prevent some of these things from happening. But I definitely think we're going to see even more violence towards the Jewish community, people who are visibly Jewish, meaning people who are part of the Hasidic ultra-Orthodox community, or people that simply wear a kippah in places like Berlin, like here in Brussels, in the suburb of the district of Molenbeek, which has a very, very high Muslim population and has been linked to Islamic radicalism in the past, in Paris, in London, in other parts of Europe. So I definitely think that the threat is definitely there, that we could see violence in the very near future, depending on how this war goes, depending on how far Israel goes in terms of bombing Gaza, and whether the on-the-ground operations in Gaza highlight even more outrage among the Islamic community, just as they were, just days ago celebrating the massacre of Israelis on the streets of various European capitals.
Do you think the governments of these countries or the European Union itself is prepared for anything that might spark up?
I don't think that they're necessarily well prepared. I'm sure that they are prepared in some sort of sense, but I don't think that a lot of these countries are really prepared for the mass violence that could break out. I mean, we have obviously issues of political correctness in which these people are not as widely condemned as, say a conservative protest would be, or something like that. But I mean, France wasn't prepared for the riots that we saw in early July, which was really unrelated to what we're talking about now. But the potential for similar riots could well happen in France over what's going on in Israel and Gaza as well. And France was clearly not prepared for that, and they're likely not prepared for something that could be on an even larger scale.
It seems like the potential for a larger scale coming out of this Israeli-Hamas conflict is ripe right now. And in fact, just yesterday, I saw a report that there was a couple of hundred men from Syria who came across the southern American-Mexican border, and they were being processed separately and sort of quietly That seems to be on the uptick. So even in America, they're starting to have more and more reports of only military-aged males coming across the border from countries that we would consider to be troubling at best. So we are definitely seeing a major trend here. Where do you think this all goes? Is it just men looking for a better life, and hopefully they're going to send money back home to their wives and their children, or they're going to bring them over, or like what is the ultimate goal in this mass migration?
I think there's different goals for different people. There are definitely people, as you said, who are just looking for a better life. There are people who are looking to go over and send money back. There are people who are linked to drug trafficking networks. There are people smugglers. There are people who are linked to sex trafficking networks. There are victims of sex trafficking networks. And there are also terrorists. We have to acknowledge the fact that groups like the Islamic State bragged about the fact that they were smuggling their fighters into Europe. And some of those smuggled fighters were part of some of the worst terror attacks in European history. For example, the Bataclan massacre in 2015. Some of those people who were involved in that came illegally through illegal migration routes. So the idea that we're not going to see more of that, especially if Hamas is, forced out of Gaza. Let's say that they're forced out through Egypt. Egypt is one of the main origin routes for a lot of migrants that are coming to Europe. They'll start in Egypt, go to Libya, and then cross from Libya to Lampedusa, and then once they're in Italy, then they go all across Europe. So we have to be careful that what's going on in Israel isn't going to lead to a mass exodus of radical Islamic extremists who are going to end up in Europe and possibly, as you said, in America, because we are seeing a lot more people coming from all around the world so that are crossing the Mexican border.
And with the Synod being what it is and the trends in the church being what they are, I don't think the church in Europe in particular, not even in America, is really ready to be surrounded and become a minority, surrounded by not just atheists, but Muslims. It's going to be a different ballgame altogether. Sharia law might be coming to a country of Christendom near you. Anyway, Chris Tomlinson, God bless you. I really appreciate your reportage and your insight to these stories. Check him out at the European Conservative. We are going to be linking to his articles. EuropeanConservative.com is the website, EuropeanConservative.com. But we'll put it in the show notes as well. Chris Tomlinson, God bless you. God love you. Have a great day, sir.
God bless.
Coming up, Edward Pentin is coming up with breaking news and stories. We're going to talk about the Synod on synodality and the Synod on the family back in 15. Whew, big times.
This is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Could there be just one word that truly sets the Catholic Church apart from all other churches? Yes, there is. Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. That word is retain. How can one word bring such distinction? Well, understanding that retain means to hold back or to keep. Jesus tells the apostles, if you retain the sins of any, they are retained. Secondly, so what does that world say about sin? The therapist says, forgive yourself. New Agers say it's just a state of mind. And the evangelical says, just tell Jesus no matter how grave the sin, he'll forgive you directly. And finally, the word retain. We all know that non-Catholics don't go to a pastor to confess grave sins. Why? Because in Protestant thinking, you get to leapfrog humans and go directly to Jesus. And guys, let's don't hide under the newest term, be accountable. Hey, we all will be accountable up to the point that it hurts, is embarrassing, or is criminal. My priest can say, Steve, your sin's not forgiven. Does your pastor? I think not. Why? Have you ever heard backlash, decreasing church attendance, and loss of revenue?
We hear all the time from listeners who discovered the station by seeing a Try God bumper magnet in traffic. You can request a free bumper magnet and start evangelizing just by driving around town. Go to thestationofthecross.com and click on promotional material under the About tab. There you can request a magnet for your listening area. We even have one for the iCatholic Radio mobile app. Request yours today.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
What kind of resistance are you getting in the social media forum? Have you been accused of misinformation, hate speech, thought crimes of any kind?
Yes, all of the above. We have been listed on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups, which, these days, frankly, is a badge of honor. Any group that's doing work in this area that hasn't received that designation might want to ask if they're being effective.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The Messenger reports Hamas threatens to start executing hostages if Gaza strikes continue. Quote, any targeting of innocent civilians without warning will be met with, regretfully, by executing one of the captives in our custody, and we'll be forced to broadcast this execution, close quote, a spokesperson for Hamas's Qassam brigades said in a statement. Hamas has claimed to be holding more than 100 Israeli prisoners in the Gaza Strip. The warning from Hamas came as Israeli Defense Forces intensified a bombardment of Gaza as dusk fell on Monday. Ground News reports 11 U.S. citizens dead in Israel conflict, White House reporting. 11 U.S. citizens have died and several others have been killed or taken hostage in an ongoing conflict in Israel. The international community has also been affected, with at least one Canadian citizen dead, 2 missing, and various foreign nationals confirmed dead. Also, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem has asked that God inspire world leaders in their intervention for the implementation of peace and concord, so that Jerusalem may be a house of prayer for all peoples. The National Catholic Register reports German Christian homeschooling family reportedly given stay of deportation. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn said in a post on her Senate website on Friday that her office had, quote, received news that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, close quote, was approving a stay of removal for 1 year for the Remicki family. The Remickis fled Germany due to the country's remarkably severe homeschooling laws. The practice is effectively illegal there, and virtually no exceptions or carve-outs for families seeking to educate their children at home. Boy, that seems awfully rigid of Germany. Maybe they should just take the bishop's advice in Belgium and discern no matter what. Anyway, those are your headline news. Praise be to God. Joining us, though, is Edward Pentin. I'm very grateful to have Edward Pentin on the program today. He's got a book out called The Rigging of a Vatican Synod. And I'm going to be linking to this book, obviously, in our show notes today, but you can find it on Amazon. The Rigging of a 2014 Vatican Synod, an investigation of alleged manipulation at the Extraordinary Synod on the Family. Edward Pentin, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Good to be with you.
I have been going through your book, and boy, chapter 1 is fire and brimstone. I mean, chapter 1's the worth of the price of admission all by itself. Let's talk about the 2014-2015 Synod, but I also want to get your take on how we're seeing parallels, overlap. Maybe the 2014 and 15 was the paving of the way for what we're seeing in Rome today. Many people believe so. But let me start with this. In 2014, Synod on the Family, who were the main characters of this drama? Who was on the side that said they wanted to manipulate things or change things and move the discussion in a certain direction, no matter how the world's bishops or the participants felt about it?
Well, it was a mix of a number of people, really, Joe. I mean, one of the main protagonists who kind of oversaw a lot of that sort of manipulation that went on, and there was clearly a sort of preset agenda, was Cardinal Lorenzo Baldassarri, who was the General Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, who is now in that position is now Cardinal Mario Grech. In those days, it was Cardinal Baldassarri, and he oversaw quite a few efforts to change sort of steer the Synod in a certain direction, and as I say, with a sort of preset agenda. And one of those things they wanted to achieve, of course, was to allow communion for divorced and remarried Catholics who divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, and that was within certain framework. And that obviously came out in the Pope's summary document in Amoris Laetitia, which is the summary document of those two synods. And so that was really the main way that they were trying to do it. But there were various different aspects of manipulation that they tried to use, which I explained in the book. And I just wanted to recall it really in terms of this synod, because you're seeing similar efforts, in many ways more subtle, but there are efforts as well to try to steer the synod in a certain way towards a certain agenda. Even though they deny there's an agenda, there's certainly a great leaning towards a sort of progressive vision for the church that they're trying to achieve at this synod.
Yeah, what I found fascinating in your book was how it seemed to be many people were caught off guard by what they perceived as manipulations. Not all of them would be people we would say are orthodox, strong, conservative voices within the Catholic hierarchy. Some of them, weren't, but they were still just sort of caught off guard by what they perceived as manipulation of the information coming out before the synod happened, information out during the synod, and information after the synod. That seemed to be a very common theme in your book, as far as controlling the messaging, controlling what the press heard in particular. So who was in charge of that component? Who was the gatekeeper of information when it came to the press?
Well, as I say, the chief person was Cardinal Baldassare, but then you had other people below, like Archbishop Bruno Forte, for example. He was one of the synod secretaries, and he was responsible for writing the midterm report. And the midterm report was put out. There used to be always a midterm report at synods, and this one was used to put out the message that the church was changing its sort of approach to homosexuality. But that actual midterm report was never seen by the Synod Fathers, so it was given to the press before the Synod Fathers had seen it. So, of course, that gave a sort of a clear sort of picture of what they wanted to the press, and that sort of set the music, as it were, for the Synod, without the Synod Fathers actually passing it. So that was one of the main things. But you're seeing them. It's very interesting how they're trying to do the similar sort of thing now, but doing it in a much more complex way. So it's not so easy to see. But but they are doing certain things to try to sort of put the opposition within the synod to one side and try to further those particular elements that they want to see promoted, such as normalization of homosexuality in the church through same-sex blessings, and bringing in women deacons. Although that's never going to happen because it's really not possible in the church's teaching and church's history for deacons to be consecrated as women deacons is not possible. So it's interesting though that they're still going to try to do that, and that the door seems to still be open, according to the Pope at least, for them to try.
You quote Cardinal Pell a lot in chapter 1, God rest his soul. You say Cardinal Pell said the document was tendentious, skewed. It didn't represent accurately the feelings of the Synod Fathers. He said 3/4 of those who discussed it afterwards had some problems with the document. He added that a major absence in the document was scriptural teaching and a treatment of church tradition. I bring that up to point out that you also talk about in chapter 1 in particular how they went out of their way to seemingly not include anything JP2 might have had to say or his institute might have had to teach on the family itself. And Cardinal Pell is illustrating this. There's massive holes, obvious problems here that you wouldn't have to be a Thomistic scholar to come to the conclusion that something is fishy, so to speak, in Denmark.
Exactly, yes. And that's what they did. They really quite aggressively disregarded apostolic tradition and anyone who was trying to propose or promote 2,000 years of church teaching. They were disproportionately underrepresented, and so you got a much more the more progressive side was magnified and amplified to quite considerably, and then of course that sort of set the pattern for the rest of the pontificate, because you've seen John Paul II's teaching very much sidelined, especially through the John Paul II Institute, which is basically completely gutted and completely changed through new statutes. So yes, but that was really set. That's why I say the synods and the family kind of set the way, prepared the ground for what we have now.
I was also very much blown away by Cardinal Erdo and the fact that he was asked to change, the reference to Jesus Christ is the opening of the document, and then change the order in which popes were mentioned because Pope Francis had to take pride of place over our Lord, and that is mind-blowing. He unfortunately went with it, according to what you reported in the book, but that is a very telling thing about about the sense of how much effort they are putting into controlling every word of the narrative in all of the documents before, during, and after. It seems rather peculiar to me that people like the Cardinal Erdo would go along with that, or any of the fathers, which leads us to the revolt that happens on the Synod floor, which includes not just people on the right, but people on the left as well. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it did lead to a revolt led by Cardinal Pell, actually. And then, of course, it led to this letter before the Second Synod, from 15 cardinals who said we're concerned about the way the First Synod was run, precisely because there was all this heavy-handed manipulative tactics. And it was very... But I think the problem with the First Synod was that it took a lot of people by surprise. They weren't expecting this kind of manipulation. And the thing is, under Synods, under John Paul II and Benedict, were very much controlled, of course, but they were controlled with an orthodox perspective. So what they wanted was to keep to orthodoxy, keep faithful to apostolic tradition, which is obviously natural, but obviously to try to apply that apostolic tradition better to today's society. Whereas the family synods were very much, the starting point was basically their own subjective analysis, experience, as we're seeing today. An apostolic tradition is sort of on the back burner. And yes, exactly, that's what they told Cardinal Erdo to do. And I think it took him by surprise in the First Synod, and that's why he went along with it. But it was interesting because in the Second Synod, he came back. He was general relator of the First and Second Synod. In the Second Synod, he kind of learned his mistake and was quite much more aggressive in terms of getting his own way in the Second Synod. But,
You quote Cardinal Coco Palmero, and he says, "We've never wished to change doctrine, only to change the application of the doctrine to particular cases. The doctrine cannot be changed." And Casper agreed to that, is what you're saying in the book. Now, that's fascinating on a number of levels, because that's exactly what Cardinal Fernandez, basically of the CDF, just said, that they're not going to change any doctrine. We're just going to spin everything in the light of doctrine and make it all fit somehow. But bringing up Casper, though, going back to the 2014-15 synods, you are at the center of a big thing that happened with Cardinal Casper and his pushing back against African bishops who in those days were defending church teaching. They seem to be caving a little bit now. So tell me about what happened when you interviewed Cardinal Casper.
Yes, well, he came out of the Synod, and I was with a few other journalists, mostly from the left, sort of progressive-leaning Catholic press, and we just got chatting, and I was interested to know whether he was concerned about the controversy of the Casper proposal regarding divorced and remarried receiving communion and so forth. And he then said, there's certain parts of the world that won't agree with it, and Africa, on homosexuality, for example, it's considered a taboo there. But then he said in Africa they should not tell us too much what to do. That was his famous quote. In other words, we won't be dictated to by what the Africans say. We're going to do it our way. And that was very revealing, really, of the way they looked at the whole situation. And you're seeing it, as I say, you're seeing it just as much today as you did then. Because they're pressing ahead with this, even though most African nations will not want any kind of same-sex blessings, for example. But they've yet to really find a voice. So we'll see if they do. But they won't want that. That was his position, and it was very revealing at the time, I think.
Cardinal Casper did not like that you published that. I want to follow up on that point here in a moment. That music means we're at a hard break for our radio network. We're talking with Edward Pentin. We're talking about his book, The Rigging of a Vatican Synod, an investigation into alleged manipulation at the Extraordinary Synod on the Family. And you can find the link in our show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. You can find that on Amazon if you just search for Edward Pentin, The Rigging of a Vatican Synod. You can find that way. But we'll link to it in the show notes. But there is much to talk about still. I want to talk about what happened after that and the fallout of that conversation with Casper, especially with Cardinal Burke getting yelled at. That was fun. But also the current synod, which has changed so much so quickly. And is there a manipulation going on right now? We'll get Edward Pentin to comment on that coming up right after this very, very quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Share us with a friend.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for October 10th. Today we celebrate St. Francis Borgia. Today's saint grew up in an important family in 16th century Spain, serving in the imperial court and quickly advancing in his career. But a series of events, including the death of his beloved wife, made Francis Borgia rethink his priorities. He gave up public life, gave away his possessions, and joined the new and little-known Society of Jesus. Religious life proved to be the right choice for Francis, who was drawn to spend time in seclusion and prayer. Administrative talents also made him a natural for other tasks. He helped in the establishment of what is now the Gregorian University in Rome. Not long after his ordination, he served as political and spiritual advisor to the emperor. In Spain, he founded a dozen colleges. At 55, Francis was elected head of the Jesuits. He focused on the growth of the Society of Jesus, the spiritual preparation of its new members, and spreading the faith in many parts of Europe. He was responsible for the founding of Jesuit missions in Florida, Mexico, and Peru. Francis Borgia is often regarded as the second founder of the Jesuits. He died in 1572 and was canonized 100 years later. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
The Station of the Cross is listener-funded, and we value your ongoing generosity. In this fast-paced world, it's easy to let your recurring donation slip due to something like a new address or a card number change. If you suspect that we might not have your up-to-date donor information, you can check with us during regular business hours at 1-877-888-6279 extension 104 or anytime online at thestationofthecross.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Edward Pentin is our guest. We're talking about the rigging of a Vatican Synod, an investigation into alleged manipulation at the Extraordinary Synod on the Family. That this book is available. This is Ignatius Press, I believe, and it's you can find the link to it in our show notes, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Edward, welcome back to the show. I want to follow up on that Casper interview and the fallout. It was pretty big. I mean, it caused lots of ruffled feathers. Casper tried to deny that he said it at all. You showed him the receipts. He couldn't deny it at that point. He didn't. Then he said he didn't know he was being interviewed, even though he's talking to journalists. I found that fascinating. But it really led to a lot of ruffling and waves being cast throughout the Synod, to the point where a book is published and released to every Synod member, and then there's a lot of shenanigans as a result to whether or not this book has been, held back, thrown away by the post office there and those controlling the Synod. Tell us about the fallout.
Yes, I mean, they weren't really connected. The Cardinal Casper episode was kind of separate to that, but yeah, I mean, it was an off the record. It wasn't an off the record, rather. It was done outside the Synod hall, so it was quite obviously, and we were journalists, so it was quite obviously on the record, and he was quite happy to talk to us. But he then denied it, and then I felt, well, I've got to publish the recording where he said it, and so unfortunately, it showed him to have said what he said. But yes, it was something which was regrettable, I think, certainly on his part. But it's all fine now. But yes, but then things went on during the Synod where various other sort of manipulations took effect, and one of them was this book, which was written by Cardinal Burke and other scholars about the Church's teaching on communion to divorced and remarried, and that was seen to be very much sort of counter. A work that was counter to the Casper proposal, and that was sort of intercepted before we could get to the Synod Fathers. It was sent to all the Synod Fathers, and they weren't able to receive it because the the Synod Secretariat delayed them receiving it. So that was another manipulation, but there were various ones, and of course they're all there in the book.
So let me ask you a question. So do you think that the Synod back for the family, 2014-2015, was that a paving the way for what we're seeing now with the Synod on synodality? With what you describe in this book seems to be the play that they're doing right now, a manipulation of information, a manipulation of messaging, a controlling of the narrative. I mean, I've been covering a lot of Cardinal Zen's opinions and Cardinal Burke's opinions on all of this, and there are many others who have spoken out. I mean, we've never seen these small group sessions held in this way where conversation and debate can't be had across the entire group. So one group doesn't necessarily know what the other group is debating or what they're saying, let alone voting rights to lay folk and non-bishops. I mean, priests are involved and lay folk are involved, and the laity have had nothing to do with deciding which lay folk gets to go represent them. Only the Synod organizers made those decisions. So what is your opinion in comparing and contrasting the family synod and the Synod on synodality?
Yeah, well, you summed it up very well. That's exactly the sort of manipulation that's going on, and it's. I think, as I said earlier, it's a little more subtle. It's not, they're not preventing books from being delivered and that kind of thing. It's more the way they're sort of working out the methodology. The methodology is crucial in these things because the way they run them tells you everything about the sort of result that they want. And of course, anyone who runs a meeting is the one who really determines the outcome of that meeting. So that's what they're doing, and it's getting quite clear what they're doing and how they're trying to get this agenda through. And the other thing too is the predominant issues in this synod, like the one of the Synod of the family, are the sort of a progressive leaning, and so you're going to get at the end of it certainly those who want that sort of result. At least that's what they're trying to aim for, is to get that result, that sort of progressive change in the church. Not changing the church's teaching, of course, because they can't. But what they can do is change the sort of pastoral practice. And by changing the pastoral practice, they then change the church's teaching. And take the same-sex blessings issue, for example. If they start allowing that, then, of course, the church is going to seem to be, in the long term, in some ways favourable to homosexual acts. And that's what they want. So this is the way they try to get around not changing the church's teaching, but by changing the church's pastoral practice.
The bishop in Belgium, I reported it this morning, the bishop in Belgium seems to be rejecting the church's teaching on euthanasia because there should be some discernment, not just concrete, right or wrong. So that seems to be a big push. It seems like what Coco Palmero and Casper agreed to that you quoted, I quoted from your book, that seems to be the model. We don't need to change doctrine. We just need to ignore it and do what we're going to do in the sense of following the Spirit. Danya Montaigne the other day asked them at a press briefing, hey, how do you know that you're being led by the Holy Spirit versus some other spirit? To which they gave a gobbledygook answer and then never really, wanted to clarify. That seems to be where we're at. So does it surprise you that in like I said a minute ago, 2014, 2015, the African bishops seem to stand up and defend, but now just the other day you asked the question to the bishop from Kinshasa, I believe it was, and he seems to give the same sort of gobbledygook answer of following the Spirit and not making judgments and all that. Like, it seems like that has definitely changed.
Yes, I know. And what's so interesting, Joe, about this is that, in a sense, they've achieved what they wanted, which was basically to have prelates suspend the church's teaching. So you had this bishop from Kinshasa, who's actually head of the African bishops, who basically couldn't bring himself to say that same-sex blessing, same-sex acts are wrong. And he just couldn't say it because he said, we have to wait for this process of synodality to come to a conclusion. But, that's precisely what the sort of reformers, the progressives, wanted, because they don't want the church's teaching being promoted and pronounced, because that gets in the way of what they want. So that's that's a game plan, and it seems to be going to plan for them.
You quote Cardinal Burke here. He says, "Oh no, we're just changing disciplines." As he's commenting on that, we're not touching the church's doctrine. But he says, if you change the church's discipline with regard to access to Holy Communion by those who are living in adultery, then surely you are changing the church's doctrine on adultery. And you go on to say 85% of the cardinals listening, according to Camillo Cardinal Ruini, opposed Casper's proposal, believing it would simply not uphold the indissolubility of marriage. If just one civilly remarried divorced person is allowed to receive Holy Communion, some canon lawyers argued it would mean that marriage is in effect no longer indissoluble. So I quote those things to sort of wrap this conversation up with this. It seems like in 2014, 2015, you had enough pushback from sort of all sides of the debate. They recognized that this was a big-time problem. But it seems what has changed is the influence and the power of the German contingent to push these progressive ideals. Is Germany basically running the show now?
Well, this is the question, Joe, and it's a good question because they're certainly here in force in Rome for this synod, and we know that they're well financed. And one aspect that I do want to find out is precisely who is funding this synod, because it does seem to be that there's a strong German influence indeed, yes. So that'll hopefully come out in the next few weeks or months.
Wow. Well, Edward Pentin, I am grateful for your time today. Thank you for calling us. The Rigging of a Vatican Synod, an investigation into alleged manipulation at the Extraordinary Synod on the Family is the book. We're going to link to it in the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. You ought to get it. The receipts are in the book. Edward, God bless you. God love you. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Joe.
Coming up, we're going to say goodbye to the radio audience, and we're going to stay on for your opinion, your take on all of this. I interact with you directly in the after show next. God love you. So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we're back. Welcome to the after show, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Mort Rouge is here. Good morning to you, Mort Rouge. Praise be to God. Mike K is here. How's that foot doing, Mike? You healing up, buddy? Good morning to you, Paul. Good morning to you, Sharon. Praise be to God. Glad you guys are here over on the Telegram side. Cindy K is here. Good morning to you, Cindy K. Trad Jack Burton is over there. Yvonne is over there. Good morning. Good morning. Praise be to God. Damon, I'm sure, is hanging around somewhere. Kathleen, Paul C. Good morning to you. Praise be to God. Bronx Catholic is in the house this morning. Good morning to you, Bronx Catholic. Boy, speaking of Bronx Catholic, did you see the protest or the demonstration that was held in the Bronx by Muslims? Was it yesterday? Guy on the bullhorn was like, Islam is the true religion, Muhammad is his prophet, and the whole world. And he said, Bronx needs to hear this. Queens needs to hear this. Woo! That's your backyard, buddy. Let me know how that feels. Eileen, good morning to you. Are we ready for all that? That's the question in my mind. That's the question. Yeah, there's Damon. Good morning to you, Damon. Praise be to God. Good morning to you. Sorry about the YouTube stream. Mateus is on the team. Mateus, you're up early, bro. Wow. No kidding. You must not be in California if you're up this early. There's no way. Glad you're on the team though. YouTube crashed. I don't know why. Who knows why YouTube does what it does? I have no idea. It just every once in a while, I think Jacob, am I mistaken in this? But YouTube is like the only real problem child when it comes to the streams.
Strangely enough, yes, YouTube, the hosting site with probably the biggest backing and technological foundation, seems to. I mean, isn't it a tool of the Antichrist? I mean, don't they have all the money in the world, like George Soros kind of cash? I mean, like, I understand. Think. Why do you break down?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make. They're the only sense. One that tends to do that. Really.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Then there's Rumble, who spends at least $1.50 every 6 months on their back end. I mean, hardcore laying out, that kind of cash. $150, maybe $275 tops. But boy, they're really putting in the effort. Boy, am I blind? Or is that just tiny font there? T&G Girl set 173. It feels like it's so far away and I can't barely read it. Good morning to you. Lynn Pine, good morning to you. J.L. Hamilton is on the team. Good morning to you. Sci-Fi Mike, Sharon, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out on the Rumbles. I see Patty over there. I see Junior Barr and Don Paddock over on Facebook. Good morning to you. Facebook's kind of steady Eddie when it comes to the live stream. I can't remember the last time we've had problems. The big problem with Facebook is they just don't tell anybody we're on. They're just like, don't worry. We won't bother a single soul and let them know that you were on. Don't worry. It's okay. Nobody will ever know that you're live. It's fine. It's totally fine. Good times. Over on the YouTubes. Maria Santos, Alberto, our friend from the UK. Good morning to you. Aitna, good morning to you. Aitna Murphy is in the house. Christopher, I see what you're doing there, Christopher. I see what you're doing there with the cross for the T. Good morning to you, Karen. Caleb, the mechanic, is back. Brooklyn can skip it, though. Joseph Clark is on the air. Good morning to you, Joseph. Kathleen, good morning to you. Joanne Reyes, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. Glad you're here. Yvonne is over there as well. And Sharon's back on YouTube. She was on Rumble for all of 7 seconds. And then she's like, all right, we're back. Troy Lockett, good morning to you. Troy, I appreciate your all your recommendations. I do appreciate that. Thank you. We're working on them anyway. Angel Knight, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Scrolling backwards. Did I miss anybody? Let me know. Lots of great conversation, though. So what do you guys think? Do you think there is a massive manipulation of the synods going back to 2014, 2015? By the way, manipulation of synods is not new in the history of Catholic Church. There are things that are new about what we're seeing now, 100%. We can talk about that. But the fact that there are people with nefarious agendas trying to manipulate outcomes is not new. Councils have such nicknames as the robber council, the robber baron council, or whatever. I mean, they're especially during the Arian crisis, there were synods being held that were like bad, came to horrible conclusions. We've condemned them since. So it's not new that you have Judases among the apostles. That is not new. What is new, some of the things that are new, is the fact that non-bishops are participating in the Synod of bishops. That's new. Giving lay people the right to vote is new. Obviously, that's new. And then, of course, we don't love seeing the complete control and manipulation and lockdown of messaging, so they get to choose and control what gets said, what doesn't get said. Ginger, good morning to you from New Jersey. VZDX from Luxembourg is on the team. Good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad you're here. Thanks for doing it. Kathleen says, JP2 gave a cornerstone from St. Peter's tomb to start a new church in Portugal called Holy Trinity. I saw an official photograph from a newsletter. Oh, that's kind of neat. Part of the messaging from Fatima was that Portugal would not lose the faith. And didn't Portugal announce Miss Portugal as a transvestite? Wasn't that just like the other day? Just 2 couple days ago that came out. So exactly what do they mean? What did Our Lady mean when she said it wouldn't lose the faith? Like there would be a remnant there that would be always faithful? Because clearly there's issues. There's big problems in the church and in society in Portugal that need to be addressed. Marouche says, the funny thing about what happened in the Bronx is that they were both Democrat-supported demonstrations. Yeah, not surprised. Not at all surprised. Damon says, yeah, the Synod is totally rigged. Seems like rigging thing is the new norm everywhere. Doesn't it, though? So yesterday on the Telegram group, when I come across stories, interesting reportage on big items, big news stories that I find are interesting or you're not hearing in other places, I try to post them into our private group in the Telegram. So as I see them, I try to post them there. I don't vouch for everything that I'm posting there. I want to make that clear. Like, I can't verify one way or the other some of these stories, but because these are like stories and they're being talked about and they're big stories, then I will post them there for conversation piece, right? So yesterday I saw a video from Twitter. I find a lot of interesting information on the Twitters, on the X's, as they say, on Twitter, that of this guy. I'm trying to get to it. I'm trying to like scroll to it right now just so I can see it. One, there's a picture of, if you're not following Ben Bergquam, Bergquam has been reporting with video footage and imagery of the Syrians coming across the southern border of America. There's a guy with a beautiful tattoo of an AK-47 on his forearm. But I know lots of guys that get gun tattoos. I don't. How are you going to live with yourself when you're 90 years old and you got some old wrinkly-looking, blotchy-looking, ugly-looking tattoo of an AK-47 in your arm? Seriously. At some point, you got to grow up and start using the AR platforms that we left behind in Afghanistan or we gave to Ukraine. Come on now. Oh, wait, sorry. That's what Hamas was doing. Mea culpa. My bad. They were, in fact, using our AR platforms that we left behind in Afghanistan and we gave to Ukraine. Sorry, my mistake. Anyway, I saw this Mike Benz on X. You guys ever? I can't probably see that. Can you see that? It's probably not in focus. But Mike Benz on X, on Twitter, had a very interesting take. He looks at the Israeli-Hamas conflict not from a geopolitical perspective, but from an energy markets perspective, which is fascinating. So he's saying follow the money. And what he's suggesting is there is much pressure. There are a lot of very interested parties into the conflict that goes on between Israel and Iran in particular. Well, who's behind Hamas? It's Iran. So Iran is launching lots of missiles at Israel from Gaza Strip and from Lebanon and Syria. So he looks at it from the energy market. Basically what he's saying, I'll summarize for you, is there is a left-wing contingent from New York who stands to make a ton of money if Iran, sitting on the third largest oil reserve in the world and the second largest natural gas reserve in the world, if Iran can be freed up to sell its energy products, they stand a chance to make a lot of money. That's on the hard left. He also points out that on the hard right, he calls it the Houston Energy Mafia. That's my backyard. They stand to make a lot of money. And he points out that the Houston Energy Mafia, the Dick Cheneys of the world, are actively involved in what goes on geopolitically in that region. And so basically he's pointing out that people on the left and the right are applying lots of pressure in these circumstances to change government and policy in Israel to allow Iran to be freed up to make a boatload of money. Follow the money is a great heist, a cash grab about to go down on planet Earth yet again. It seems like it's quite possible. So here's what's interesting about this. So this Mike Benz, after I watched this Mike Benz video yesterday, I sent it to a friend who will remain. Morush says, you're a saucy tart. Hey, bro, I got a tattoo as well. One that I will regret when I am 90, if I can make it that far. But anyway, I sent to a friend who is a very high-level person who, well, I shouldn't say that. I got to be careful. He's somebody who works in the Houston energy market. He is an analyst, and his work helps those in the executive C-suite of his organization to make prudent decisions so, they can protect their investors and all of the rest, make money in the energy business. So he has to see what's going on in the world, and he has to give an astute analysis. And one of the things this person told me was that the oil and gas business, the Houston Mafia, so to speak, they routinely hire former U.S. military intelligence people. So they have a lot of these. It sounds to me like they have a lot of these people on their staff. So they retire, they get out of the military, and then they go to work for organizations like this one. And their job is to provide security and information and analysis about things going on in the world so that their executives, one, when they're traveling to that region, can have that intel and, take action accordingly, but also pivot if necessary from a financial perspective in the oil and gas business. So, one of the things he told me about these former U.S. military intelligence people who now work in the energy business is anytime something happens, any big news item kicks off, they are immediately sending out emails to the proper people within the organization, giving them a heads up and some insight from their perspective, from an intelligence perspective. So like anything that happens, earthquakes or whatever, they're jumping on there and saying, hey, here's what I think is going to happen. Here's what I think you should be thinking about, blah, 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 blah. He said to me, when Hamas attacked Israel, there was zero emails flying around. It was complete radio silence. And he found that incredibly strange. Why is that? So yesterday, I listened to Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA. Does anybody listen to Charlie Kirk USA? Let me know. I don't listen to him very often, I'm going to be honest with you. But there are so many people asking this fundamental question: how could this happen? There's this video of this lady who served in the IDF because Israel sends its women to fight wars. God will judge you for doing that, by the way. Women are not only the daughter of God's daughters, special creatures, special creations, special and precious, but they're even more precious resource when it comes to family, and they ought to be protected, not fighting our wars. We don't send our daughters to fight our battles. Israel, God's going to judge you for that. You need to repent and stop sending your daughters off to fight wars. Men need to fight wars. As David said when he was a boy, when he went to bring food for his brothers who were fighting the Philistines. I almost said the Palestinians. Yikes. Freudian slip. When they were all fighting the Philistines, and they saw Goliath out there, standing there, taunting them, mocking them, blaspheming God. This boy stood up and said, well, I guess since there's no men here, I'll have to do this for you, because God will not be mocked. Well, anyway, you don't send your women, you don't send your ladies, your moms, you don't send your wives to fight your battles. So that's a rabbit hole. I'm getting off into rabbit hole territory here. When there's a knock on the night, you don't ask your wife to go check it. That's not what you do. Men have to fight. Men have to slay dragons sometimes. That's just the way it is. That's what we're built for. That's the bottom line. We don't send our women to do the fighting. God's going to judge you. Repent of that while you can. Anyway, so this lady who had served in the IDF some 20 years ago, she gets on and she makes this video that's not gone viral. And she's saying, how is this possible? How is it we didn't know? How is it they could pull this off? She can't fathom it. She said when she served in the IDF, a pigeon would sound the alarm. A pigeon approaching the fence would cause things to go off in the middle of the night. She'd have to get up and go check it, and just verify that it was a bird and not some Palestinian terrorist. So, how is this even possible? So many people are asking this question. And as I reported today, Egypt has come out and said, we warned them, they didn't listen. And Scott Ritter is a cantankerous fella. He gets himself into a lot of critique and commentary online for sure. Big following, though. He reports over at RT, if I'm not mistaken. He basically had a huge article yesterday basically saying that arrogance in IDF and Israeli intelligence has led to this. They got very arrogant. They got complacent and lazy. And as the report coming out of Egypt this morning said, they're focused on the West Bank, and Egypt was like, you better pay attention to Gaza. You better pay attention to Gaza. And they didn't. And here we are. A lot of people are saying, Charlie Kirk asking the questions, this doesn't pass the smell test. It doesn't make sense. It's not possible technically for Israel to not know. How does the CIA not know? How does the IDF and the Mossad, how do they not know that all of this planning and preparation is about to go down. Oh, and then we learned, by the way, from a reporter out of the Tablet that Iran has infiltrated U.S. intelligence services at the Pentagon. Oh, yeah. Did you hear that story? Were you guys aware of that story? The journalist over at the Tablet pointing this out. Yeah, there is we can put a link to it, but Tablet, let me pull this up for you. Let me just, I got to get this out of the way. Let me just put this over here. Yeah, so here's the Tablet article. High-level Iranian spy ring busted in Washington by Lee Smith. Good times. Good times. Good times we live in. So Iran seems to be very closely linked to all the activity. But here's the real kicker in all this. You got Egypt, who's under the thumb economically of the United States. So they don't get to go do much unless the United States says so. And because otherwise the CIA will just simply schedule yet another regime change. Who remembers Mubarak? Did that go well? Just asking for a friend. That's all I'm doing. Just asking for a friend. So, where are we at with all this? It feels like, and somebody said something that triggered all this in me. It feels like, and I told this to my friend when I talked to him yesterday over the phone about the energy situation. It feels like we're the butt of the joke. It feels like everyone knows. It's like, when there's a joke going around about you and you're the only one who doesn't know it. That's kind of how it feels. And by the way, this Mr. Benz on X and the video that I started this tidbit, this rabbit hole on, and talking about the energy markets, guess who he said was at ground zero, epicenter, the center of all of the financial windfall that could possibly happen. I'll give you 3 guesses on which crime family stands to make the most, and the first 2 guesses won't even count. How about that? Let me know. Let me know your guesses and what you think is the crime family at the epicenter who stands to make the most money if Iran gets to start selling its huge amount of oil and gas. You let me know. Master Baker's on the team. Good morning to you. It says, it seems to me that we are allowing a fit, ready to fight army of men into our countries. We are allowing in a fit and ready army to fight our countries. It's okay. Let me just try to spin this as positive as I possibly can, right? Because I got to be honest. I feel like all I'm doing is wearing my tinfoil hat anymore and just talking about the sky falling. I feel a little guilty about it. I'm going to be honest with you. Caleb the mechanic. Crackhead's dad. Oh, man. Let's be charitable anyway. I'm lacking charity at the moment. Joseph Clark says, the Bidens? What do you think? Could it be the Bidens? I don't know. Anyway, going back to Master Baker's point of view, let me just spin this as positive as possible. If I were living in a country where I had almost no resources and things were looking very desperate and I needed to provide for my family, I would do as St. Padre Pio's dad did, and I would leave my family behind if I had to and go to America, and I would work and send my money back so that I could send my son to an excellent Catholic education so that he could become a Capuchin friar that he said to me that God called him to. I would do exactly as Mr. Forgione did, and he moved to Pennsylvania and he ran a farm. He was a farm manager in Pennsylvania, which is a part of the reason why the Padre Pio Center is there with his bloody gloves that you can go and visit and venerate, actually. But nonetheless, I would do that. 100% I would. And if it meant my family starving or not starving, I would do so illegally if I had to. I would do that, 100%. So I'm going to assume that there is at least a percentage of all of these people immigrating from anywhere to anywhere else, that they have good intentions, that they do so for the right reasons. How is it they can afford to pay the coyotes the thousands of dollars? Because if you can afford thousands of dollars, then you could generally afford to live in a starving country, because thousands of dollars make you wealthy in places like that. So that's the one caveat is I scratch my head a little bit to go, if you can afford to pay the coyotes, can't you just afford to feed your family? If you're willing to sacrifice so much, then what else is it? There must be something more. Maybe it's that you just want shopping malls. Maybe just like the rest of us greedy Westerners, you want chocolate malt milkshakes on demand. You don't want to have to wait for special occasions. You want to be able to get your 3 or 4 chocolate malt chocolate shakes, per day. Wash that back with some bacon cheeseburger, some curly fries with some queso. Oh yeah. And then, of course, that still leaves room for dinner and other meals. Like maybe that's your dream. Is the American dream is to live in this materialistic world. It's hard to say, but I'm going to say that there's a percentage of folks that aren't thinking. Clearly, they're not thinking of nefarious reasons. They just want to live as fat, dumb, and happy as the rest of us. Okay, fair enough. That doesn't change the facts that there is definitely a percentage, as Chris Tomlinson pointed out, that have nefarious intentions. They're coming here out of a sense of hate, out of envy, out of destruction. They intend harm. They intend evil. And most assuredly, as the gentleman in the Bronx yesterday said, the Sharia law is coming. It's coming for the Bronx. It's coming for the Queens. It's coming for our communities, our backyards. And it's sad to see it happen in Europe, especially because as Catholics, we think of Europe with fondness and romanticism. We think of Christendom, and it breaks our heart to see Europe having fallen, just like Quebec has fallen. Quebec, 100 years ago, 98, 99% Catholic, practicing Mass-going Catholics every Sunday. What is it today? Is it even double digits today? I'm curious. Or are we down into single digits already? Complete gutted in Quebec. One of the most Catholic epicenters of planet Earth has been gutted today. It's heartbreaking. It's horrible. Sharon says, well said. I hope we are in the end times. I'm going to say, I hope we are not in the end times. I fear that we are. And of course we are in the end times. Jesus made that clear that his first coming is an ushering in and a preparation for his second coming. We are in the last vestiges of the age of mercy. What is coming is the age of judgment. How can a good God condemn someone to hell? Because you have rejected him and chosen hell for yourself. And he respects your choices. You die in a state of mortal sin, you go to hell. It ain't rocket science. You want mercy? Mercy will be given you. There are many, many pious examples that can be given of ardent, hardcore sinners, hard-hearted, God-rejecting, mortal sin-loving sinners who at the moment of their death repented and received mercy. There are many pious examples that can be had in that category, which demonstrates that God is a merciful God. If God can allow Constantine to be baptized on his deathbed and make it to heaven after his crimes, then you have a chance. And there are stories of Mussolini, being in purgatory. How could it be possible that Mussolini, of all people, could maybe possibly make it to heaven someday? Well, if he repented of his sins in his dying breath, God can be merciful to him. And then he would just spend the rest of time on earth. The time clock that earth has could be spent in purgatory, making up for his many crimes. But whether or not Mussolini is in fact going to be in heaven or is in fact in purgatory now is beside the point. I believe that God is so good and so merciful that a person like Mussolini could make it there if he repented. Of course, he's got to repent. I mean, that's part of the equation, right? He's got to repent. And praise be to God that if Mussolini could make it, maybe there's a chance for me too. I don't know about you. I can't say if that you're, let's just be honest about you. But me, there's a chance. There's at least a chance. Praise be to God. But the trick about the end times, though, the trick about the end times is how many people will end up going to hell because they're simply not ready, because they reject God, because they're arrogant. as we are told by St. Peter that in the, in the last days, baptism now saves you, he said in his epistle, and he's referring to Noah and the ark and the waters that came and swept away everyone on earth except for Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and their daughter-in-laws, and the animals. That's it. They were the ones left behind. So when St. Paul talks about, there are 2 in the field and 1 is taken and 1 is left, the rapture isn't referred to here. It is people dying because the people left behind are the ones that are saved. The ones that are taken are the ones dying. They're taken by the flood waters and they drowned. Did they repent? Or did they die in their sin and go to hell? There will be many who will die in their sin and go to hell. There will be many because of the great apostasy. Now, here's the thing. I talk about this stuff all the time in my private life, and it feels overwhelming. I want to be honest with you. Jesus is a good God. Jesus is merciful, kind, and amazing. He will forgive if you ask him. And if you don't, he will send you to hell. But that's what's coming. And so many people are going to die. In the great apostasy, we go from faith, like Quebec, like France, like Spain, like Portugal, like England, like Germany, like Italy. We go from faith, like Mexico, and we go to agnosticism. We go from belief to non-belief. We go from religiously centered to worldly centered. So if you have friends and family who think of the world, look at the world through a worldly lens, they are much more susceptible to the influence and manipulation of Antichrist. But don't think that you're not, because St. Paul warns us that even the elect will be misled. And Jesus, when he returns, will he even find faith on earth? So even among people like you and me, the temptation is going to be insane to buy the manipulation, the lies of the devil. How much worse is that for people who are, let's just say, good people, but they see the world through a worldly lens? So they're already starting out at the worldly level. They're going to be much more susceptible than people who are at least starting up here at a pious and religious level. And they can fall a little bit further and catch themselves in time. So what we're facing in the end times is the mass apostasy, the great tribulation, and many people who will deny the faith, who once said they had faith, who once claimed that they would love and love Jesus with all their heart, even to martyrdom, will deny that, and they will die as heretics, and they will die in mortal sin, and they will go to hell for all eternity. That's what's at stake in the end times. So as much as it brings about the resolution, as much as it does away with the evil in this world, ultimately, the reality is many, 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 many souls will be lost. And it will be incredibly difficult. Many will not want to be tortured to death. Many will not. They will recant. They will offer the incense, and they will refuse, and they will die as heretics. We should pray for their souls. That's the issue. That's what's at stake in the end times, which is why I don't want it to be the end times. But I firmly am coming to the conclusion that we are nearing it. We are very much near it towards the end. I mean, how much time? I don't know. You can neither know the day nor the hour. The issue is not knowing the day or the hour. Okay, I can't know that. I'm just a knuckle dragger. What the heck do I know? Nothing. But I'm not naming the day and the hour, but I can tell you this. Jesus also said in Matthew 24 that, yeah, you can't know the day or the hour. He said that. Then he also says, but you have to read the signs of the times. You have to. You have to. Just like those Christians in Jerusalem in 70 AD, when they saw Trajan's army surrounding the town, and they saw angels in the sky in army battle array. All right, time to move to Pella. It's time to get up and move out. It's time to head to the hills. We have to read the signs of the times. So what are the signs of the times telling you right now? Do not buy the lies that come out of certain prelates who want to tell you to act and think more worldly. We don't want to act and think like the Antichrist. So even if an angel should come and preach another gospel, don't believe it, as St. Paul would say. You should believe the gospel that you have been given, that has been handed on in tradition by word of mouth and by letter. That's what we hold on to today. Live in a state of grace. Seek virtue. No matter what comes out of the Vatican, that never changes. God is a God of hope and mercy if you'll ask him. And if you don't, then comes the judgment. God love you.